What if history took a darker path, where the Nazi sword never shattered on the harsh, snowy fields of the Soviet Union, completely changing the landscape of World War II? In reality, the valiant Soviet resistance, harsh winter, and German strategic blunders led to the disastrous failure of Operation Barbarossa, weakening the German war machine. But what if that scenario didn't happen? If the Wehrmacht hadn't failed on the Eastern Front, would the world have faced a darker future? And would the atomic bomb have been necessary? In the summer of 1941, Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, an invasion of the Soviet Union on an unprecedented scale, betting everything on a lightning victory. The goal was to destroy the communist regime, seize resources, and enslave the Slavic population, expanding Lebensraum for the Germans. An ambitious plan. Initially, German forces achieved swift victories, advancing deep into Soviet territory, encircling millions of Red Army soldiers, and approaching Moscow. A map of the Eastern European Front in 1941, showing the stalled Nazi advance before Moscow, with red arrows indicating Soviet counterattacks, conveying tension and accurate historical details. However, tenacious Soviet resistance, inadequate preparation for the harsh winter, and severe logistical problems slowed the German advance. They could not capture Moscow before the freezing cold set in. The Russian winter became an unwitting ally of the Soviet Union, paralyzing the German army. The Soviet counteroffensive in December 1941 pushed German forces back from the capital's gates, marking the first failure of the Blitzkrieg. This event ushered in a prolonged and bloody war of attrition, completely changing the war's dynamic on the Eastern Front, draining both sides' strength. First turning point: assumed superior German logistics, a mild winter, or a decision to capture Caucasian oil instead of Moscow, completely changing the situation. Moscow falls quickly. Major industrial centers are occupied. The Red Army is destroyed or dispersed, forcing the Soviet Union to sign a peace treaty favorable to Germany. Second turning point: disastrous military defeat shakes Stalin's rule. Internal pressure, ethnic uprisings, or a coup will lead to the collapse of the Soviet regime. News of the Soviet collapse shakes the world. For Nazi Germany, this is a resounding victory, freeing millions of soldiers from the bloody Eastern Front. Millions of German troops are redeployed from the east to the west, significantly boosting strength on other fronts and reinforcing the Reich's defensive lines. Supply trains begin to rush oil from the Caucasus, food from Ukraine, and coal from Donbass to the heart of the Reich, an unending flow of resources. This immense resource stream fueled the German war machine, ensuring abundant supplies of fuel and raw materials, eliminating concerns of shortages. Plans to invade Britain, which had been indefinitely postponed, are now reconsidered with new confidence. Germany turns its gaze westward. The Luftwaffe, significantly reinforced by new pilots and aircraft from the Eastern Front, launches an unprecedented large-scale bombing campaign on British cities. London turns into a sea of fire. Industrial centers are destroyed. Britain faces an unprecedented crisis, with skies full of smoke and flames. These attacks cripple British defenses, paving the way for a potential landing or a more effective naval blockade. Admiral Donitz's U-boat fleet, no longer concerned with the eastern route, intensifies attacks on Allied convoys in the Atlantic. Submarine attacks inflict heavy damage on Britain's supply lines, pushing the island nation to the brink of starvation, causing a severe food crisis. In North Africa, Erwin Rommel, with unlimited supplies and reinforced armored divisions, easily crushes Allied forces. He captures Cairo, opening the way to the Middle Eastern oil fields. A vital energy supply route is secured for the German war machine, strengthening its power. The collapse of the Soviet Union also frees millions of prisoners of war and civilians to serve as slave labor in German factories and construction sites. They are brutally exploited for labor, reinforcing the war economy and allowing Germany to focus on super weapon projects. Germany accelerates the development of improved V-2 rockets, capable of striking further and more accurately, spreading fear from above. Me-262 jet fighters are mass-produced earlier, giving the Luftwaffe air superiority, controlling the skies of Europe. In the Far East, Japan is spiritually invigorated. With an unprecedentedly powerful Axis alliance, they are more confident in expanding their influence. Although the attack on Pearl Harbor might still occur due to resource needs, with Europe under Germany's heel, the U.S. faces a dilemma. Does the U.S. fight alone in the Pacific, or try to salvage a Europe that has almost collapsed? A difficult and risky choice. The absence of a fierce Eastern Front allows, Germany to focus its resources on developing its nuclear program at a terrifying pace. Although not yet possessing atomic bombs, Germany's research progress far surpasses reality, creating immense pressure on the Allies, elevating the nuclear arms race to new heights. The resounding victory in Eastern Europe also allows Germany to shift its arms production factories from defensive to offensive, increasing war material output. Germany's increased confidence destabilizes Allied governments. Leaders struggle to find new strategies to confront this global threat. Neutral countries like Sweden and Switzerland also come under immense pressure, forced to make concessions or increase economic cooperation with the German Reich. With Middle Eastern oil fields within reach, Germany can sustain a long war without fear of fuel shortages, an unimaginable strategic advantage. The peoples occupied by Germany in Eastern Europe are more severely oppressed, becoming a vast source of slave labor, reinforcing the Reich's resource and industrial base. Germany's nuclear program is granted unlimited funding and resources, accelerating research, creating the threat of weapons of mass destruction earlier than anticipated. The U.S. faces a dangerous prospect of isolation without major allies in Europe, forced to self-reliantly fight in the upcoming global Cold War. The absence of an Eastern front completely alters the course of the war, creating a more terrifying world where power is defined by Axis victory. In this scenario, the world enters a dark era, lasting 100 to 200 years under the heel of a new order shaped by the Axis powers. Europe becomes an expanded Greater German Reich, a vast empire managed with an iron fist by Nazi Germany. All dissenting voices are suppressed. Conquered nations become general governance, or satellite states, with populations enslaved or racially cleansed according to Aryan ideology. Cultural diversity is eradicated, replaced by a forced Germanization culture. Local languages and traditions are forbidden. Cities like Berlin, Vienna, and Rome become monumental architectural centers, reflecting the regime's power and brutality. Lebensraum projects are thoroughly implemented in Eastern Europe, transforming fertile lands into German agricultural colonies. Slavic peoples are oppressed, exterminated, or pushed further east. A brutal demographic shift, lasting for generations. Technology, especially military and civil engineering technology, develops leaps and bounds under German control, solidifying their dominant position. Intercontinental ballistic missiles, supersonic aircraft, and possibly energy weapons are developed, consolidating Germany's global hegemony. The nuclear arms race doesn't stop at the U.S. Germany and Japan also develop their own nuclear arsenals, creating a multipolar world. The world faces a looming doomsday threat, a potential nuclear confrontation between military superpowers. The United States becomes an isolated fortress America, forced to live in constant tension and military development, becoming the sole counterbalance to the Axis bloc. A prolonged Cold War, not between ideological superpowers, but between an isolated democracy and two aggressive totalitarian empires. Proxy wars occur in South America and Africa, where local regimes seek U.S. support against German and Japanese influence. Great Britain, if not fully conquered, would become a besieged island, struggling to survive, or becoming a German satellite state. Japan, with its expanded Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, controls much of Asia and the Pacific, flourishing under a harsh militaristic regime. Life for people in German and Japanese-occupied territories is a continuous struggle for survival, under brutal surveillance and oppression. Resistance movements, though often suppressed, smolder in the shadows, awaiting a faint glimmer of hope, fighting for freedom. The world would never see the birth of the United Nations, or an international order based on law and human rights as we know it. Instead, it would be a world divided by heavily militarized borders, where fear and domination are the governing principles. Education is tightly controlled, brainwashing younger generations with Nazi and Japanese militaristic ideals, turning them into loyal tools of the regime. Science and art are heavily censored. Only works serving the empire's interests are allowed to exist, stifling creativity and freedom of thought. Healthcare and social welfare are reserved only for those of the master race, while other ethnic groups are neglected, facing disease and death. Regular military patrols, newly built concentration camps, and a sophisticated surveillance system maintain order through fear. New generations grow up in a world where war, oppression, and racial discrimination are normal, distorting their personalities and futures. International travel is strictly restricted, reserved only for honorable citizens of Axis nations, isolating cultures from exchange. Language and media are tightly controlled. Radio and newspapers only broadcast propaganda, distorting the truth, brainwashing the public. Small-scale uprisings are brutally suppressed, but the flame of resistance still smolders, waiting for the opportunity to reignite, carrying a faint hope. This scenario paints a grim picture where the most cherished values are crushed under the wheels of tyranny. The human spirit is tested to its limits. It emphasizes the importance of decisive moments, pivotal battles, and the resilience of the human spirit in shaping history. Thank you for joining this hypothetical journey. What do you think would happen next in such a world? Please share your thoughts.